Welcome back to Morning in America. I'm Mitch Carr. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell appears to be moving to the center ahead of the midterm elections. At least that is according to one reporter from The Hill. Those midterms are coming up in November. He says he's willing to work with President Biden if the president will back middle-of-the-road proposals. As The Hill reports, quote, McConnell's message is aimed squarely at suburban voters, whom he believes will make the difference in battleground states such as Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, end quote. And joining us now is the author of that piece, the writer of those words, Alexander Bolton. He's a staff writer for The Hill. And I want to ask you first, Alexander, is this him moving toward the center, or is this more him being comfortable potentially working with somebody who was a senator for a long time in Joe Biden before he moved to the executive branch?
Well, I think it's both. And of course, Mitch McConnell and President Biden struck some very big deals when Biden was vice president under Barack Obama. In 2010, they extended the Bush tax cuts for 2 years. At the end of 2012, they extended 82% of the Bush tax cuts. They also worked on legislation to avoid a default in the summer of 2011. So they have a history of working together. And what McConnell is telling voters now is, look, I can work with Democrats. There won't be gridlock dysfunction in Washington. If the president operates within the 40-yard lines, which is basically his metaphor for the political center, he says he's willing to work with them. And I think part of the message here is to tell voters there won't be dysfunction in Washington if Republicans take over the Senate, at least. And also, I think it's an effort by McConnell to move away from President Trump. The Democrats want this midterm election to be a referendum on Trump. What McConnell's saying is that, look, I can work with Biden. We won't see the dysfunctionality that has been associated with Donald Trump.
Now, Alexander Bolton, again, who wrote that Mitch McConnell might be shifting toward the center. What makes that more credible this time around? He's been in charge of the Senate as majority leader in the past, and we've seen him really play defense. And even as minority leader with a 50-50 split, he has killed a lot of different objectives that the president has had this time around. So why do we believe that after the midterms, if the Republicans take over, that this is for real and that this won't continue to be defense played by the Republicans and led by Mitch McConnell?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, when Obama was president, and quite a few years ago by now, McConnell was known as the obstructionist in chief. I mean, the Democrats would routinely point out how many filibusters he had to stop the Obama agenda. Now, of course, what was different then is when McConnell was pulling out all the stops to slow down the Obama agenda. There were the Democrats had control of the House, the Senate. They had big majorities in the House and Senate, and there was a real, the Democrats had a lot of leverage to move forward on stuff. I think since then, McConnell's come to the realization, or he has calculated that, the obstructionist label is an effective one. So he's certainly trying to counter it. And as to how do we know things will be different this time around? Well, we can just look at the Republican leader's record in this Congress. I mean, he has worked with Democrats on some high-profile issues, most notably the gun safety bill. And this is a bill that it maybe doesn't go as far as some Democrats wanted. It doesn't have universal background checks, but it does enhance background checks for gun buyers younger than 21. It does give money to states to set up red flag laws to take guns away from people who are deemed dangerous. This is something the NRA opposed. McConnell has an A+ rating with the NRA. He still supported it. In fact, he was the lifeblood of the negotiation. He's the guy that really made it happen behind the scenes. So I think that's a pretty strong indication that he is willing to work with Democrats. There was no similar example before Republicans took over the Senate majority under Obama. So I think he is changing, and I think he also realizes that he's getting up there in years. His career is coming to an end. He really wants one more shot as Senate Majority Leader, and I think he feels he really needs to communicate to those swing voters that Republicans are willing to work with Democrats. And the other thing that's different now compared to when Obama was president in 2010, 2012, 2014 elections, suburban voters have moved away from Republicans under Trump, and that's something that McConnell routinely points out. The suburban voters have moved away from the Republican Party. While Republicans do very well in rural and small town areas, they need to get those suburban voters back to return to power, and I think that's why he's tailoring his message now.
An interesting note from Alexander Bolton's article as well. He said McConnell said he'd be willing to move on policy potentially, but as far as the appointees go, that's still going to be tough sledding for the Democrats. Alexander Bolton from The Hill, thank you for your time.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.